Hey folks, thanks for watching. It's Thursday, September 4th. I want to cover a few things in the video here today. One, we saw some interesting weather just here yesterday on Wednesday. High temperature record broken in Canada and British Columbia. We'll talk about that. Saw some supercells in Kansas. If you're looking closely, you can see some of those kind of firing off right there on the loop as I mentioned them. Saw some monsoonal thunderstorms in the west, and then we're looking out into the forecast at a breakdown of that Pacific block that we've been talking about even last week or the week before. And that has implications for the temperature and precipitation forecast, which we'll get into in kind of the middle of the video. At the end, I do want to touch on the tropics. We're seeing those heat up, particularly in the Pacific. But we also have an area of concern that we have to keep an eye on in the Atlantic. So if you jump to like the end of the video, you'll see more of a discussion on that. At least with respect to what we're seeing here, this is a visible satellite loop. It's going to replay. This is yesterday afternoon. You can see the smoke kind of billowing out of Canada here. Here's that cold front leading along this low pressure system that's been here near Lake Superior up over Ontario, Canada. We saw showers and storms push through this area here, through an area that really needed it. A lot of precipitation deficits in here over the last 14 or even 30 days. And those supercells that formed in Kansas, leaving a line of severe reports, hail, wind, overnight through kind of the central portion of the state here, all the way down toward the Wichita area. And then look at all the smoke up here near British Columbia, Washington. If you look overnight, these little hot spots on the infrared, those little black spots, those are wildfires burning, being captured by the infrared satellites. It's neat to see those. It's not neat to have the wildfires, but good to see the satellite doing its job and catching those fires. We want to jump over this again yesterday afternoon, watching here in like east central Kansas as that cold front pushed through. Saw some storms through northern Illinois, central Illinois. Man, look at those supercells firing off. This is near like McPherson down through the Wichita metro area. Saw hail and wind reports associated with those supercells there. You can see those storm reports. Very isolated, but impressive. These are significant wind reports, right? We call these high wind and large hail reports exceeding 2 inches diameter in a localized area, but impressive nonetheless for kind of early September. I do want to jump over and show you the satellite just to zoom in from Washington. We're watching the Wildcat fire here. This is kind of the western portion, southwestern portion of the state. Let's see if I can play this. See these pick up yesterday afternoon. There's that Wildcat fire here. Large smoke plume emanating north. You can see these fires here in southern British Columbia. Near where we hit that high temperature, Ashcroft, British Columbia, which is kind of the southern portion of that province, up toward 40 degrees Celsius. That's about 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So that is a temperature record for the month of September, I believe for all of Canada. So an impressive record that was captured yesterday, 40.7 degrees Celsius. It's up maybe above 105 degrees Fahrenheit. That's an impressive temperature record for early September here. This is just a picture, I believe it's of that Wildcat fire, at least one of the fires burning there in Washington. You can see that smoke plume there. Been an impressive kind of late wildfire season there, just given the heat that we've seen build into the Northwest. And as a result of that, we've seen a lot of this near surface smoke kind of been percolating through Montana, northern Idaho, Washington, lingering fires in California with their own smoke plumes. Some of this getting all the way into the Midwest now. This isn't that like upper air smoke that causes the red sun, but you can't smell it. This is near the surface, so starting to see, even air quality be impacted all the way over in like Iowa, Nebraska, maybe even Illinois today, as this kind of gets caught behind that cold front. This is just the last 24 hours of precipitation observed from the MRMS. Let's see if I can zoom that in a little bit. Not as much monsoonal thunderstorm activity yesterday as we saw the day before on Tuesday. Unfortunately, not as much along the Sierras. So less of that like dry lightning chance, which was starting to spark and start some new fires here. So it's good to see that move to the northeast, give them a break. Did see some of that rain come through the Midwest. Underneath some of these streaks, you can kind of see the streaky nature of this cold frontal regime. You're getting up near like a half inch, maybe a little bit more, but most folks getting anywhere from like a tenth to a quarter inch. And then some areas in here totally, at least from the MRMS data, missing out on some of the more appreciable precipitation. As you go more into Michigan, Indiana, that coverage picks up a little bit. And we're going to continue to see that front kind of stall and push through the Ohio River Valley and into New England here today. We'll look at that in just a second. If we just back up and look big picture at the upper level winds here, this is at 500 millibars. You can see the responsible upper level feature for that low pressure system, this deep trough we have right over the Great Lakes, low pressure system spinning kind of right underneath that. Now, as impressive as that system is, and it is responsible for bringing these cold frontal showers and storms through the area over the last 24 hours, my eye is immediately drawn to this little kink in the line here. And in fact, this little high pressure, or not high pressure, this high wind speed You see this just little divot here in what's otherwise this northwest flow. This is a potent shortwave trough that's quickly moving through the jet stream flow, and it's on its way into the northern plains in the Midwest here today. And it's really this feature that's going to bottom out those temperatures here toward the weekend. So as much as this current low pressure system is responsible for that initial cold front, it's really this little what we call shortwave trough. It's this little short wave and the broader flow that's going to help usher in a lot of that cooler air out of Canada and into the central and eastern part of the country as we go through the weekend. I just want to jump back. That's the 500 millibar flow today. That's September 4th. Let's just go back exactly 1 month ago. And you can see that more summer-like regime, even just a month ago, and how much more flow we have over North America in just 1 month. It shows you how much more autumnal or fall-like that we've gotten with a lot faster jet stream flow, more features to talk about, more weather to talk about as we get further into winter. There's just more of these systems to talk about, low pressure systems, cold front, and as a result, these all hazards map from NOAA start to get more colorful. We see frost advisories as a result of those low temperatures expected overnight tonight and tomorrow night into Saturday morning. These wind advisories, even some high wind warnings here in the northern plains, South Dakota, North Dakota. There's that heat that we were talking about, southern British Columbia, over near the SeaTac area. This is more east of the Cascades into central Washington, where we see those heat advisories near Spokane. I believe Spokane has been included in a red flag warning there. So keep an eye on additional wildfire activity there today. Otherwise, flood watches here over southern Arizona, southeastern California. You can kind of see the reason for that if we just jump back. I'll show you the 500 millibar. This is Tropical Storm Lorena, actually probably well on its way to a tropical depression at this point as it weakens, but that flow coming around that storm, pushing up into Arizona here, even southeastern California. So you can see that southerly flow near the Baja, bringing up that more moist air, and those flood watches issued as a result of that. We do have some more tropics. Again, I'll talk about this kind of near the end of the video, but this is Hurricane Kiko here in the east central Pacific. Look at those minimum overnight temperatures. This is tonight, so looking into Thursday morning, you can see those cooler temperatures now settling into northern Minnesota, the Dakotas. We're talking, mid to high 30s here, so that's prompting those frost advisories. And this area here, northern Wisconsin, up through northern Minnesota. Elsewhere, looking at low 40s, very high 30s, kind of this corridor here, all the way toward the Chicago metro area, getting down near 50 degrees, maybe high 40s, all the way over toward Michigan. That's overnight tonight. So take this forecast into tomorrow. You can see those cooler temperatures overspreading closer to the Ohio River through the central plains, still warm out west, especially the northwest. And again, those temperatures bottoming out low 40s, maybe high 30s in this area and here, maybe not quite as cold in that corridor Friday morning, but Saturday morning, continuing that push of cold air as it kind of stalls out just south of the Ohio River Valley. Warm continues in the northwest. These are overnight temperatures. In the next slide, we'll look at those daytime high temps. And then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, pushing more so over the eastern U.S. And we start to warm up on the backside of this. So this is the pattern change I referenced earlier. We're warming up, more completely on the backside of this cold front this time versus the last kind of 10 days. We saw, another progressive shot of cold air come in. The second, the first one kind of moved out of the way, not quite seeing that same pattern over the next week or two. I want to show you, this is the max temperature from that same NWS, National Weather Service forecast here. High temps continue today in the upper to mid 90s here for the central and eastern Washington area, prompting those red flag warnings. Wildfire concerns persist, unfortunately, for another day or two. And then also looking at those heat advisories. Man, look at the high temperatures here. Red River in the north in the 50s, 60s across the wide area of the upper Midwest here today, and then in the 70s across maybe more of the western, central, and eastern Corn Belt. Those temperatures fall further on the plains over toward Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan tomorrow on Friday. Talking 60s and 70s, warmer along the Ohio River Valley and east as they await the cold front, but that pushes through on Saturday all the way over kind of toward the Appalachians, down through northern Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas. Just impressive wide stretch on Saturday of temperatures in the 70s, no warmer than that, and then even in the low 60s in the upper Midwest. And then finally out west, California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, underneath the influence of a low trough and low pressure system that's inching a little bit closer to California. Eric touched on that yesterday. It's starting to encroach. Temperatures are falling as a result of that. And even the heat over central and eastern Washington, northern Idaho, starting to wane a bit, low 90s, instead of those mid to high 90s. Take the temperature into Sunday, Monday, Widespread cooler temperatures across the East Coast at this point. Now Tuesday, all the way over into the Carolinas, the Metro East. But by Wednesday, there's those temperatures rebounding on the backside, all the way from the high plains over toward now Illinois, even Michigan at this point, getting back toward those more seasonal, if not warmer temperatures as we get further into the week next week. Now the reason for all this, let's see if we can make that a little bit bigger. This is the 500 millibar height map from the ECMWF. I'll make this valid when I'm recording this about 6 a.m. There's that initial trough I talked about, right? That low pressure system spinning north of Lake Superior. There's that shortwave. We can see it nicely in this 500 millibar height map. And I'm going to take this forecast forward through today and this evening. And you can see that quickly swinging around that deeper trough here over Ontario. And that's really bringing in those much cooler temperatures overnight tonight, prompting the frost advisory. This trough settles in on Friday. We keep this ridge here over British Columbia and Washington. That's what's lingering that heat in through the early part of the weekend. And this just sits here and lingers over Sunday, keeps that northwest flow over the Midwest, that drier Canadian air, less precipitation chances. But notice this trough here west of like Eureka, California, southwest Oregon. It's moving closer and closer. This is Monday, September 8th now. So helping to cool off the temperatures in the western U.S. And now that ridge that was here at the beginning of the forecast, by next Tuesday, it's starting to inch out east of the Continental Divide, and those temperatures are going to rebound as a result of that. And even into like Wednesday, September 10th, now that ridge is increasing in magnitude over Nebraska, Kansas. At this point, you could call it like a Lima, Colorado, or like a western Kansas ridge. And that trough now settling in over the western U.S., bringing those temperatures down finally to this area here, while the warmth overspreads more so of the central U.S. Eastern U.S. stays probably a little bit cooler getting out into next week because we do have this lingering kind of stale troughiness, if you will. Not like a proper big trough, but just kind of weakness in the heights here is what we call this. Probably keeping those temperatures down a little bit. This is actually likely to lay down kind of the stalled stationary front somewhere in the Gulf. We're actually going to talk about that because I think it has implications getting out further into September for tropical activity maybe coming out of the Gulf, one of these homegrown systems that we've been worried about getting further into the hurricane season. Look at the ECMWF. This is the precipitation forecast. Let's make this valid about 7 a.m. There's those showers currently stretching through Lake Erie all the way through southern Illinois through the Ohio River Valley. Rather than looking at the forecast, let's just jump over. Show you the mosaic grid. I'll get a better view of those. I'll jump over. Let's get an east view. See those moving through now east of the Ohio River Valley and through central and eastern Kentucky. Again, this is a corridor we've been talking about that has been dry. So nice amount of rain coming through here. It's quick. These storms aren't slow. They're not training over the same area, but we have gotten anywhere from a quarter to a half inch in some places out of this. So nice to see some better coverage moving through an area that's just been bone dry over the last 30 days. I know there's a number of issues from western PA all the way through West Virginia, southeastern Ohio, into Kentucky as well. So rooting for this, to stay together. At least getting like a quarter to half inch of rain for some of these areas. Even Ontario's been dry as well. You can see some of the storm systems moving through there north of like Lake Ontario at this point. All right, now I got to find my place again. All right, there we go. So there's that activity forecast here this morning. We take the forecast into this afternoon. You can see this pushing more so over West Virginia, Pennsylvania. Good coverage here across New York as well, and eastern Tennessee. Here's that next shortwave. You can see it's actually got its own low pressure system associated with it over the Twin Cities, bringing a chance of precipitation through here this evening on Thursday. That moves into Wisconsin overnight. And then there's that cold backside flow behind it as it races through northern Michigan, the UP, and then spins up back into that Lake Ontario, that larger trough as it kind of settles in here. Now, I will say one thing, I think kind of keeping the lid on temperatures, or I should say keeping the floor up for northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, where we're expecting that potential for frost, is that recent rainfall literally overnight right before we're expected to hit that frost. And that extra moisture in the atmosphere tends to keep kind of a higher floor on the temperatures, not allowing them to drop all the way down to like 32, 30 degrees, 33 degrees Fahrenheit. So could see a frost, but I'm a little bit skeptical just based on the expected rain overnight tonight. On kind of the backside of this flow here, maybe seeing some light showers here through Kansas, Missouri here tomorrow. This is now getting into Friday afternoon. Some of those trying to move through Kentucky, southeastern Missouri, into Tennessee. We'll be rooting for some of these just given how dry we've been in this area there. But this is early Saturday morning, and we're getting into a pretty dry regime on the backside of that trough here as this ridge kind of slowly develops in this corridor here. Now we're out into Sunday. You can see some high plains moisture now getting into Texas, Central part all the way over to the Caprock area, even up into southeastern Colorado. Notice this trough now inching closer to California and Oregon. This is early next week, so starting to see Oregon, Willamette Valley pick up in precipitation. This is now into Tuesday morning. Perhaps seeing a system early next week move through Minnesota, northern Wisconsin again, but this isn't, not bringing that widespread rainfall to much of the central and Midwest at this point. Otherwise, still seeing that trough spin across the western U.S. You can see some Four Corners precipitation, Oregon, northern California. Perhaps another system later in the week moving through the northern plains, the upper Midwest. Can see that now moving through Minnesota and Wisconsin. This is late next week on Friday, getting well out into the forecast here. But the big story is this corridor here. I just circled a big chunk of the continent. Not seeing a lot of precipitation in through this area except for those two little systems that move through the upper Midwest and the northern plains. What does this look like just on the 5-day precipitation anomaly from the ECMWF? Well, this is that current cold front moving through. Talked about that shower activity. There's that high plains moisture that's helping to get pushed in from Tropical Storm Lorena that's spinning here in the eastern Pacific, helping to bring some moisture up here into Texas, the Four Corners region. We talked about the flood watches. There's that trough getting closer to Oregon and California. Really, by and large, this area is staying dry all the way up through British Columbia, down through like Georgia and even into Florida. If we go out 7 days, can see some of this precipitation coverage increase. Some of that upper Midwest, those two systems we talked about, but 4 to 10 days, sure, this corridor here, seeing some chances, but when we eliminate kind of that cold front rainfall over the next 48 hours, and we just do the 4 to 10 day, look at how dry this area jumps back over. So this is going to continue to be a concern until we get one of these like big deep troughs in here, or something coming out of the tropics to help us ease back off this drought, because that cold frontal rain was not that impressive as it came through. You're talking 1/4 to a 1/2 inch, maybe up near an inch in, Michigan, some of like New York, Pennsylvania. But even looking at the 10-day, still very dry for much of the Mississippi watershed at this point. If we look further out into the forecast, we can kind of jump over and we often look at these, the 4-panel of long-range precipitation. Because that trough settling in out west, expecting more precipitation here. Talked about the chances over the northern plains next week, even late next week. So seeing higher precipitation chances here. That's consistent from the ECMWF ensemble. This is that 8 to 14-day outlook. So we're talking about like September 11th through the 17th. AIFS has a little bit more activity here over the central plains or the high plains, stretching out over toward Iowa and Missouri here. But the GFS ensemble kind of keeping more of that corridor wet here toward the northwest and the northern plains. East, and all these models, the 8 to 14-day outlook staying dry. The eastern like half, almost the country stretching even into Texas. See that there from the CPC, the drier quarter here. I will note, if you look at the ECMWF ensemble and the GFS ensemble, keep an eye on this here, this increased precipitation signal out of the Gulf. Again, we'll talk about that in a second when we get to the tropical forecast. Eric went, I'll call it fishing for a long-range signal, and we couldn't come up with much yesterday when we were kind of looking well out into the forecast here. I'm going to take this 500 millibar height forecast from the ECMWF ensemble. You'll notice I'm skipping over kind of the 7 to 10-day forecast because we just talked about that. Let's get to like Saturday. This is now September 13th, getting almost into like a 10-day forecast at this point. There's that, I'll call it a stale trough now over the west that we talked about inching closer to California and Oregon next week. By the end of next week, it's kind of a weekend. It's sitting here over Nevada. That stale trough we talked about over the Carolinas, the southeast, that's sitting here still in that kind of similar area. And what I've seen here is as that Pacific block has broken down, we see plenty of jet stream flow coming through the North Pacific underneath this little trough here near the Aleutians of Alaska. And then the jet stream kind of goes way up, well up into the northern territories of Canada. And it leaves these kind of lingering troughs here underneath it. And this kind of reminds me of that spring pattern that we dealt with this year. And right now, given that this one's still here over the Carolinas, that's going to keep this Bermuda high weaker, at least into like, this is now September 13th. So without getting this strong Bermuda high back, even though we have some flow coming into the Central Plains, right? We saw this area start to go over wetter in the long-range forecast. Until we get that Bermuda high back, stretching all the way over toward like Bermuda, what we name it after, it's going to be hard-pressed to get this area here back wetter, the same area that we're worried about those current precipitation deficits. And if you just jump over, this is the AIFS ensemble. I actually went and pulled up the jet stream level flow forecast. This is, again, September 13th, almost 10 days out. And this isn't a bad, if you just look at this, let's ignore everything else. That southwest flow across the Four Corners region up in the Midwest, this is not a bad regime for getting, a low pressure system here for Kansas or Missouri that would track through Illinois, Indiana, for getting precipitation into this area. The problem is we still have that lingering trough in the forecast from the ECMWF ensemble. It's the one I just showed you. There's that lingering trough, and it's there in the AAFS, this jet stream flow. And you see this like increasing speed in the jet stream with height as we go into the North Atlantic. This is an area of divergence in the upper atmosphere. And what we mean by that is it's an area that's going to help develop a low pressure system near the surface in this area here. Well, there's the island of Bermuda. It's that little speck. I know it's going to be hard to see once this gets uploaded, but there's Bermuda right there. So if we develop a low in this area here, that's the opposite of a Bermuda high. And so that's going to further prevent moisture return for getting up into this area here. So I still see a dry signal, unfortunately, for the middle part of the month for much of the kind of Ohio River Valley, the eastern U.S., this corridor here, which has seen a lot of those precipitation deficits settle in. Starting to look wetter for this area here. We'll see maybe later in September if we can break down the Bermuda high, maybe get a tropical system in, help increase moisture here. But of course, we don't want all the implications that come with, want a stronger system. You can see that low pressure system again, that low pressure anomaly, these blue colors right over the island of Bermuda from the AFS again, September 13th. I mean, that is not a Bermuda high. That's a Bermuda low. That's not going to get it done. And that concerns us given all the dry weather that we've seen just over the last 14 days. But it looks very similar if we did it over the last 30 even. Okay, I do want to touch on the tropics here at the end of this video. Let me see how much time I have left. Okay, I think plenty of time to get this done. So this is Hurricane Kiko spinning here in the Central Pacific. Lorena, we've kind of talked about already. Had to talk about her given some of the moisture that we saw getting into Arizona and then the southern plains. But if we look closer at Lorena, it is weakening currently. Still a storm. Tropical storm warnings are out for the Baja here, and this is north of Cabo. Expected to weaken into a depression and kind of stall here over the peninsula. Not an uncommon kind of evolution for some of these systems here. Some of this moisture is going to help get up into the Four Corners region and the southern plains, but it's not doing one of these big, stronger recurves that we maybe thought about earlier in the week, which was going to bring more precipitation to the southern plains. We've actually walked back a bit of that forecast here, and I can jump back and show you. And that 5 to 10 day anomaly range. So this is the 5 day, so bringing that moisture in here. But if you remember earlier this week, this was a wider stretch of higher precipitation anomalies, as this was expected to recurve a little bit stronger. But given it kind of just weakens and stalls out here over the next kind of 7 days, not seeing this area go over nearly as wet as we thought earlier in the week, getting out into next week. Of maybe more notable concern for the U.S., which will include Hawaii, and that obviously is Hurricane Kiko, currently a strong Category 4 right now. It's actually weakened quite a bit here this morning. I think the next bulletin they put out, they'll kind of reflect that weakening a bit, but still Category 4. Saw this increase in strength overnight last night into a major hurricane very quickly, now up to a Category 4. That's spinning here. The forecast for this one is a bit concerning because it has that M marker. That's major hurricane, so Cat 3 strength plus. Through the day today, on Wednesday, keeping that tomorrow from the National Hurricane Center in their forecast through Friday, all the way over to Saturday, and by Sunday, expected to weaken to just a hurricane status. That's still a powerful system. And then by Monday night, I am surprised the National Hurricane Center is keeping that H on the screen here. And I'm surprised for two reasons. One, we are expecting it to weaken. I'm not discounting the National Hurricane Center, but believe it or not, Hawaii is not known for a lot of hurricane activity. It gets a few here and there, but we're talking like, usually weak tropical storms, very rarely a hurricane. And so to see one forecast from the National Hurricane Center this close and on like almost a beeline to the islands here is, it could be a rare event. And we're talking next week, a landfall on like Tuesday a.m. for a weakening, albeit still somewhat strong system heading toward the islands in the state of Hawaii here. If we look at all these different forecast model runs, I mean, this, what we call kind of the forecast envelope of all the different scenarios, is pretty tight over the next 5 days in the lead up to this. I mean, a few of these forecasts keep it, still pretty far away, but these would even bring impacts. Now, again, the good news is it's weakening now. We saw that this morning, not as impressive looking on satellite. If I can just jump over and show you what I'm looking at. You don't see like a big clear defined eye. There is still one kind of in there. And we do see some storms going around the eye wall quickly. So still a strong storm, but not this like, mega Cat 5. But nonetheless, could be a rare event here with a lot of these forecast models taking it directly over the Big Island or Maui here. These numbers that are on here are telling. So these are how many hours out we are in the forecast. Since this was initialized overnight, let's see if I can update this. Nope, didn't update. So we're talking like 120 hours out from landfall at this point. And now the good news is if we go and check the model intensity, so all these different hurricane models that run for Kiko here, all expecting it to weaken fairly quickly. And by 120 to 130 hours, this is where we're expecting that landfall near the islands. Most of these models bringing it down to a Cat 1, if not a tropical storm, early next week when it nears the islands. Now, fortunately not staying up near a major hurricane, but I do have to mention some of these that are a little bit stronger, closer to landfall, some in like almost Cat 2. I don't know if I trust anything keeping the storm at Cat 4, just given how much cooler water it has to go over the next kind of 72 hours. But there is this possibility that we could see a hurricane very near the islands early next week. And that's a rare case. If it does get a little bit stronger, my concern would increase, by the way, for some of these southern tracks because it's moving fairly quickly. And so the strongest winds and some of the heaviest rainfall would be on the northeast side of the system. So some of these tracks that are a little bit stronger that take it southwest of the main island here would maybe actually increase the impacts to the Big Island. That goes for Maui too, with some of these kind of going right over the Big Island. So that track matters in terms of the highest impacts, in terms of just how north and south the storm goes. We're also keeping an eye on the East Atlantic here. It's actually, this doesn't look like much, but this little cluster of tropical thunderstorms west to Africa that's kind of jumped out into the Atlantic here has caught the National Hurricane Center eye for potential development. Again, doesn't look like much, but if you look closely, they are like very weakly trying to spin around one another. Not a ton of low level called verticity or spin, but enough to catch the eye of the National Hurricane Center, giving that cluster of storms an 80% chance of developing into a tropical system over the next 7 days. So watching this one closely. This forecast, it's not a system yet, so we never have a great handle on where exactly it's going before an actual system forms. But I will say some of these forecast model runs have taken the potential system further to the south than it did earlier, where some of them were more like this, more of like that Aaron track, which eventually cut out to sea. So the longer it stays in this area here, the longer it kind of stays in our area of concern for eventually coming back up and maybe being a mainland issue. Still far, far too early to talk about this. We're not even going to be able to get a good handle on where the system's going until like middle to late part of next week. In fact, if I jump out and show you the ECMWF ensemble forecast for that potential system here, all the way at the end of next week, this is Friday of next week, this storm's only expected to be threatening the Lesser Antilles around that time. Some of these model runs already take the system, a strong one at this point, but are starting to recurve it further to the north. That would probably lessen the impacts, chances to the U.S. Some of these bringing it over the Lesser Antilles, obviously that would be impactful for the Leeward Islands here. Or the Windward, I should say. But if it gets through here, likely weakening here over Hispaniola, but the longer it kind of stays in this corridor here, the more we have to worry about something coming out here, maybe getting closer to the U.S. or maybe something coming up through the Caribbean. So we'll see if it trends further to the north. Because we have this weak trough here sitting over the Carolinas next week, we talked about that and the forecast. That would help steer it out to sea. If it sneaks underneath this trough, as we say, maybe out toward like next weekend, we'll have something of a storm we might have to talk about. It's still far too early to discuss that. The other thing we're watching in the tropics, if we look at some of these long-range forecast models, Eric's been showing this on the ECMWF extended model. I'm just showing you the very end of the forecast range for the ECMWF ensemble, which does go out 15 days to September 19th. Looking at the 5-day precipitation anomaly forecast in that range, again, we've seen a lot of forecast precip in this quarter here. We call this the Bay of Campeche, way down here in the southern Gulf. And we do see homegrown systems come out of here. We've seen these in the past. We'll have to watch this area. The reason this is down here, the reason the models have caught on to this, both the ECMWF extended and the ensemble, is because this high pressure that's coming in behind this low, that's tracking out of the area now, associated with this cold front that's moving through, is going to lay down a stale cold front in this area here. And that's going to back the winds up in the southern Gulf and allow a little area, almost like a surface trough, like very weak low pressure system to develop way down here. It's going to have some convergent flow with winds blowing out of the northeast like that. You have the trade winds coming up like this out of the southern Caribbean. So you have convergence in this area here. So precipitation, tropical thunderstorms expected in the middle part of September in this area here. That's not saying, hey, we're definitely going to have a hurricane come out of here. It's going to say we at least have conditions that are right for thunderstorms in the Gulf. And if conditions then go favorable for those to further develop into a storm, we might have something to talk about near the middle, maybe even the latter part of September. Again, just like the potential storm in the Atlantic, it's too early to say what the risk might be for the U.S., but it does put something on our radar to keep an eye on going over the next few weeks. And if we look at that extended forecast, the 30 days from the 15th all the way through October 15th, dry in this area here, unfortunately. We talked about we don't really see a strong signal to say otherwise, given that weaker Bermuda high as of yet. But man, that is a strong signal for Gulf precip that we have to pay attention to. I'll leave it there today. Appreciate you watching, and Eric will talk with you all on Friday.